It is my pleasure to welcome up Emily Pachuta, former Invesco Chief Marketing and Analytics Officer Americas, to the stage. Emily, great to have you kicking off day 3. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Julia. Thank you so much for having me, and welcome to everyone who's joined this session. Really hoping that we have a lot of great interaction and good questions.
Me too, definitely. Let's encourage that. Now, listen, just while the folks calibrate those poll results, which I'll unpack with you before your presentation, I know that you've spoken at one of our flagship events before, but this is a change of topic. You're now discussing marrying strategy and direction and value proposition, brand identity. What is it that brought you to want to discuss this on the summit today?
It's a great question, Julia. It was actually how I was going to open my comments, so maybe I'll start here. It seems like this topic is very of the moment right now. In conversations that I'm having with executives, CEOs, and others, in different arms and legs of financial services, I'm hearing a lot of conversations around brand. And CEOs and other executives are really wanting to build awareness and understanding of their brands with their customers or prospective customers. But invariably, as we talk, the conversation starts to turn towards, what makes the company unique? How has the business grown? Where is future growth expected to come from? Is it expected to come from the same place or something different? And so clearly, this to me points to a need to harmonize value proposition, business strategy, and brand strategy, right? Just by the way these conversations are evolving. So I just thought this was a very of the moment topic. And so excited to talk about it today.
Big time. Thank you. Can't wait to get into it too. Let's just quickly unpack that poll then. I'm told the results are ready, and then we'll let you away with your presentation. I'm interested on your thoughts on this, Emily. So, of course, we asked what that big hurdle that the folks face in marrying brand strategy, business strategy, and value proposition. This is what they said. A tie for the front runner here, a lack of a united strategic North Star. That's kind of what you're alluding to there in your intro, Emily. And then internal departmental silos. They're the clear front runners with 31% each. Are you surprised by that at all?
No,
No.
I'm not. I'm not surprised at all. I thought, I did think that, there'd actually be a three-way tie with those two, and then not really fully having a comprehensive view of the client or deeply understanding the client, or to the extent that you need to. I know you all are talking about data and personalization, and I think those topics are very connected.
For sure.
But no, I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised by that, and we can sort of unpack both some sort of, I'll say, more academic thoughts on that topic, as well as when during the fireside chat we can get a little bit more practical about maybe how people who are here in the audience today can be part of affecting change in terms of the North Star articulation, as well as the business silos.
Yeah, there's so much sort of internal politicking to this marketing piece, as well as, of course, the strategy in itself. Well, production, let's get Emily's slide deck up onto the stage. And then, folks, I will appeal to you. Like Emily says, we'll have a window, hopefully, at the end there for a conversation. We love your engagement, so please do pop on stage if you want to get involved. And I believe your slides are there. So, Emily, you have the floor.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So, look, I sort of already spoke about why I thought this topic was really very interesting. And so why don't we start to think about what do these three things, value proposition, business strategy, and brand strategy, have in common? So if you think about value proposition, right, this is, how a company articulates what makes them different from their competitors, as defined by their customer. And then if you think about business strategy, this is what a company does to create value for customers, as well as employees, shareholders, and other stakeholders. And then last but not least is brand strategy, which is how a company shows up to customers so that they prefer that company to others. So really, they do have one thing really in common, which is the customer. The customer is the common denominator. And so, this little graphic shows how these three things can harmonize around the customer. But there's some tricks to this, right? It's not so easy. If it was so easy, we wouldn't be speaking today. It really requires left and right brain thinking. So both the science and the art, the creativity and the discipline. It takes constantly listening to and truly knowing your customer That requires a sort of operating model, it requires technology to enable that. And then it takes internal commitment, both resources and operating model. Including how will you know if your company is truly client centric? I found this to be very interesting. Forrester does a state of customer obsession survey, and their 2023 survey showed that 90% of CEOs indicated that customers guide all of their business decisions. But CMOs said 57%. And so there's clearly a disconnect. And so I think we all have to always be asking ourselves the question, is our company as client centric as they think they are? So, what are some of the challenges? And it is some of the challenges to achieving this harmony. We did ask some of these in the poll question. And you can see here that, sort of where I thought that the results would fall quite similar, not exactly the same as to where they did fall. But organizational silos was a big topic. And I think, when you think about organizational silos, what comes to mind? For me, what comes to mind is, you know, these different silos actually have different goals, right? They might be incentivized differently. They might have different revenue expectations. And so, that creates silos. There's often, because there's silos, disconnected or different views of the customer. And I mean, I think if you think about different companies that you work with, I'll use an example of a bank. Think about how the different silos of that bank approach you. You might get an offer for a credit card. You'd get a separate offer for a car loan. You might get a separate offer for a high interest savings account. And that just demonstrates that they are not thinking about you as a single person. Each business unit there in that bank is thinking of you as a separate target as opposed to a single customer. The second thing here is about not fully understanding the customer. Where I come from, that was a big challenge. Is there a single source of truth or a client 360-degree view that everyone sees and has access to? Right? It's not just the purview of a select few who have access to that information. And there's a cultural piece to this too, which is, do non-client facing employees believe that they play a significant role in delivering the client experience, right? So there's culture embedded in that as well. And then finally, the North Star. I could talk for hours on this topic because I think it's not a single issue. Some companies actually don't know what makes them different. And, that requires a lot of sort of introspection and also listening to your customers about how they perceive you as different. And you have to talk to actual customers, how they perceive you as different from competitors and prefer you to competitors. But it also is about articulation, right? Which is, can all employees articulate what makes their company different and say the same thing when they talk about differentiation? I've often found that is not the case, and that, especially if you have an organization that is B2B and has a lot of salespeople involved in it, it's really critical that everyone can articulate what makes the company different in a consistent way. So one of my passions is about data and analytics, and I do believe that data and analytics are truly the great enabler of harmony here between value proposition, business strategy, and brand strategy. And the reason that I believe that is because data is about the customer. This is the way that you can observe, everything that your customer is doing and saying about you. And I think that by understanding that, it can drive greater harmony. I see three pieces in this idea of data and analytics as an enabler. The first, which we mentioned earlier, is comprehensive customer data. Right? Do you understand all of the transactions that they're doing with you? Do you understand their interactions with you, both when they are known to you, right? If they call like the service center, or if they're maybe not as known to you, for example, if they're visiting your website or if they're, engaging with your social media. And then are you also getting constant client or customer feedback You need those feedback loops across multiple points of the client experience to really round out your data set about the customer. Then predictive analytics, right? Now you have all of this data. It's in one place. It's governed. You have product owners, right? And so it's believable data. So then, this is a wonderful opportunity for predictive analytics and taking data and turning it into insights, because data alone doesn't do anything. It's the insights that you pull from it that actually has impact. And then finally, democratization. Data is, again, not the purview of just a select few. You have to figure out how to scale data and insights so that it is in the hands of all the people who are making critical brand and business decisions. So it sounds hard, right? I mean, this it sounds like, multi-pronged, so many different stakeholders and pieces have to come together to harmonize the three topics that we're talking about today. But harmonizing does drive growth. McKinsey did a longitudinal assessment coming out of COVID of client uh, experience leaders and client experience laggards. And it shouldn't really surprise us, but client experience leaders grow, at more than two times the rate of client experience laggards. So, harmonizing these three things: value proposition, business strategy, and brand strategy, really does drive growth. That's the business reason. That's the critical ROI of the investment in making this harmony work. And this is a group of marketers. So I always like to have a call to action for marketers. Marketing really does sit at the center. I was actually, quite pleased to see in the poll question that, it was 13%, but it wasn't that many respondents who felt that the reason for the lack of harmony or the challenge in finding harmony was because marketing didn't have a seat at the table. But I think it's very important for marketers to realize that modern marketing sits at the center, and we really are, whether it's digital or brand or the way that we can capture data about the customer, we really are the ones who are making it happen and presenting to customers the entire face of the business. So, with that, I think, we will, Julia, turn it to more practical ideas, experiences that I've had, and then really looking forward, to hearing from all of you, questions, as well as sharing your experiences, why you answered the poll questions the way you did, et cetera.
Like you say, you've sort of split it into two parts, laying out some theory, and then perhaps we can get practical now. And folks, I'll appeal to you if you want to get involved in the conversation. You know how to do it by now. Pop your thoughts into the chat, and Carl will get you right up on stage to interact with us directly. In the meantime, Emily, let's get into this then. Can you perhaps give us a tangible idea of how you've seen organisations, do what you're talking about here, marrying up and harmonising these three prongs: value proposition, business strategy, and brand strategy? What's your sort of checklist or steps that you've noticed to be outlined as to be integral on that journey?
Yeah, so I'll give you, four things that I've seen as key to success, and then I'll share an actual practical experience
Great.
there. I think the first is there has to be a true commitment to putting clients at the center of decision making. I do find that disconnect of the 90% and the 50 something percent between the CEOs and the CMOs. That disconnect is very interesting.
Mm.
I can't explain it, right? I have hypotheses about what might be making for that disconnect, but I find that very interesting. And it's very easy to say you're client centric. It's not very easy to behave in a way that is client centric. And so I think that that's really important to have that commitment across the firm. I think you need to have operating models in place. I've seen operating models because that gets rid of the silos, right? If you think about having operating models that are about different client types or different client segments, I've seen that work particularly well in breaking down silos. You need to make an investment in client data and client data capture, client data governance, et cetera, right? You really need to become a much more data centric company. And the last thing is emotional. You actually need humility. You need to have humility in your C suite because clients are going to tell you if they're happy or unhappy with you. How do you respond to that? right? Do you double down and get defensive, or do you really start to say, okay, we hear this, and here are the steps that we're going to take to actually delight our customers? Um, an example that I have, we were involved in a large merger and acquisition of another asset manager. So, for those of you who don't know, asset managers create mutual funds and ETFs and other investment products that individuals and institutions invest in. And so we did a very, very large acquisition of a US based asset manager. And, you know, when we did that, everything that our salespeople and our marketers knew about clients because of the data ecosystem, it all broke. And frankly, we were unable to pay salespeople based on transactions because we couldn't map the sale from the client to the salesperson, right? Like, so there was real crisis. And we also were very disruptive to our clients, right? And acquisition is very disruptive to clients. And so we took it as an opportunity to truly reframe around the client. And the first thing that we did was we did a competitive benchmarking body of work. And so what that does is it helps you understand, what do your clients think of you compared to top competitors. And we knew we would do terribly, right? We knew we were actually measuring it at the worst possible time. But you have nowhere to go but up. And so we did do this competitive benchmarking. As part of that, we also were able, because we had so much data from this body of research, we were able to understand what were the drivers of client loyalty, right? So what were the drivers of a delighting client experience that was actually going to cause our clients to do more business with Invesco? And so what we saw there, and then we were able to see how we ranked in those drivers of loyalty. That set a 2 year roadmap of technology investment, data investment, content investment, marketing commitment, sales training. It set like 2 years of roadmaps
Mm.
in different work streams, all to address the client. 2 years later, we repeated the benchmarking. And for our top clients, we now ranked on par with the top competitor. Right. And so, and
Wow.
those clients were doing more business. Right. So there was financial, you could actually draw a straight line between loyalty and willingness and doing business with the company. But that's what it takes. Right. It really takes reframing everything around the client.
Yeah. Can I ask, Emily, because interestingly, this idea that you share about that 2 year roadmap and actually how measurably impactful that had been, even after 2 years, which in many worlds and in a traditional world is not a very long time. But it seems
Yep.
that we're in a climate of impatience, perhaps. And on the panel discussion yesterday, I recall there being a conversation about this sort of pressure put upon marketeers to provide kind of ROI and measurable results much quicker than that, and perhaps getting the faith of other stakeholders for 2 years can be quite hard in and of itself. How did you persuade, I suppose, your fellow players within that movement to make sure that you could stick to that roadmap and not sort of give up on it and move on to something else, which does seem to happen a lot in this space?
Yeah, no, agreed. So I think two things were at play here. The first was, this was a defining moment for the firm, right? This integration, this acquisition was a defining moment for the firm. And
Yeah.
it was either going to succeed or fail based on how we were able to retain
Ah,
clients. And
yeah.
so it was like a defining moment. So that was very important. That said, even then, it's very hard to keep everybody's energy up, right? And
Yeah.
certainly markets have been volatile over the past couple of years. And so the way we did that was, one, you knew what your North Star KPI was going to be, right? We wanted to improve our scores. We wanted to see revenue increase over time. But then you had interim things, right? So that you could celebrate, because keeping internal motivation here is very important as well, right? People get tired, they move on, and
Yeah.
so you have to make sure that you have ways to celebrate small wins, progress, right? And so each one of these work streams had very clear interim KPIs that we also went after. And look, not everything is a win. You also have to have these sort of interim KPIs to know if what you're doing is going a little bit off track, so that you can recalibrate, right? Everything isn't a clear line to success. And
Yeah.
so that those interim KPIs are really important.
Yeah, and like you say, just some of it is, spirit. And if you can't
Yes,
kind of
yes.
keep that, then everything else is actually, quite frankly, lost. Really, really great advice there. Thank you for sharing on that. You've talked about really the pivotal importance of being a client-centric or customer-centric organization. Can you give us then, we're talking sort of practicality here, what does that look like in practice? In your presentation, you talked about perhaps people who aren't in customer-facing roles, if they don't feel their connection to that output and to that end result, then could they get lost in the fray and perhaps not buy in as much? So, how can you make that shift to where everyone has the customer front of mind at all times?
Yeah, so I'm going to start with culture on that one, which is, everyone needs to feel invested in the client experience. And it's very easy for client facing parts of the organization, including marketing, right? Marketing is incredibly client facing,
Yeah,
irrespective of whether you're B2B or B2C. Marketing is really interacting with clients all the time. And so it's easy for sales, for marketing, for relationship management, those types of functions. To feel very invested in the client experience because you see when it's working and delighting and you see when it's not. And but it's the others who are actually the most critical enablers of the client experience and who are really the enablers of bringing together value proposition, brand strategy, and
yeah,
business strategy to the customer. And so I'll use technology and operations as two kind of critical examples of that, and sort of practically what we did to keep them highly engaged. So one of the things that the marketing organization was responsible for doing was building these digital interfaces so that clients could engage with their data, with their investments, et cetera, a little bit more easily. It didn't require so much manual intervention. And so this was, we designed the experience based on feedback from clients, but technology and operations actually had to do the work, right?
yeah,
And so the way we kept them engaged was we brought the voice of the client to them, right? We made sure that they actually literally heard from clients about what was a problem for them in the current digital experience that they were having with the firm, so that then technology understood, like, oh, we're solving that
yeah,
problem. Like, we're solving that with our skills. We're really valuable. Our skills are making a better client experience. And look, maybe this was unique to our company, but we really did see a big lack of, like, it was like technology was building technology widgets as opposed to solving client problems. And when you turned that and they became sort of solvers of client pain points, you saw actually their engagement go up, their productivity increase, and it just was, everybody was just felt more engaged in the business itself. So I think there's a big cultural piece there. And look, you can't forget, this has to go up, down, across an organization, right? I use technology and operations as an example because they're not as overtly client facing as some other functions.
sure, yeah,
But even people in more client facing organization functions like marketing, think about somebody who's relatively junior on your team. Do they really understand the why behind what they're doing? Right. And I think, having that why center around the client really does change the dynamic and the energy of an organization.
yeah. And you're right, it can be such a big attitudinal shift. Surely everybody on the call today has experienced, you know, the bosses above, the powers that be say, we're doing this now. Why?
Yes.
That's the why you get, rather than, oh, I get why, because I've heard it directly. I kind of have that direct understanding and that direct relationship. So it's a really good
And
piece of
it's
learning to
so
share.
it's so interesting in that regard. One of my earlier in my career, I actually stood up a client research organization at a company that did not have any way of listening to clients beyond what I would say is sort of anecdotal listening. So they, setting up a sort of formal ability to listen to clients. And we would do these sort of conversations with clients, and we would record them and share them with the C-suite.
Right.
And literally the eye opening of, like, wow, like, that's our client. And it's like,
Yeah.
and I think, like, this was many years ago. What you've seen now is a trend with CEOs to actually engage with clients, even if it means that they're taking calls at the call center or something like that. Like, they really want to hear from the client.
Yeah.
And I think that that's really integral. That's really integral and very, very eye opening, especially to people who are more home office oriented.
Right. Big time. What an amazing note to leave it on, and a really sort of practical thing to explore back in the business. Emily, thank you so much for kicking off day one with such a bang. It's been great to have you.
Great. Thank you so, so much.